Good afternoon, everyone. Ben here, and today we are going to be updating my Senate election map and how I think things are going to go. Of course, we have our typical gradient. The lightest shade is leans, likely would be the next darker shade, and safe is the darkest shade, obviously. And this is essentially to say how much confidence I have in the prediction. So the lighter the color, the more likely I think it's extremely competitive. And what we're going to do is I've got a bunch of states that I'm looking at to possibly change or update or say something about. And we're actually going to go ahead and start with Arizona, which currently we have some. Oh, these polls haven't changed a bit. Never mind. But as we can see, against just about everyone, Kyrsten Sinema seems to have a decent. She has a decent lead over just about everyone, but it's also normally a red state, so that's why I only have it as leans, but it is a Democrat year. So we're actually going to exit out of there. And California, because of the jungle primary, I just want to say that Dianne Feinstein is going to maintain her seat. However, we should note that there's going to be a lot fewer votes in the general for the Senate because there is no Republican running. As you can see, about 30% of voters are just not going to vote in the general, and we can assume those are Republicans. I believe there were 38% of votes given to Republicans, so essentially had some of these candidates not run, there would have been a Republican in the race for them to vote for. So now we're on to Florida, where every poll that came out in the month of May and early June from reputable, at least semi-reputable pollsters, to varying amounts indicated Rick Scott was actually ahead, and and public policy polling, Gravis marketing, these two were done much earlier. In May, it seems like Rick Scott got a favorable advantage, +4, +1, this one's actually the narrowest, +6, and +3. Of course, we've got 8% going to others and 18% undecided, so of course that's a lot to factor in, so I'm kind of slightly ignore this one. This one is definitely reputable, so is Morning Consult, and Florida Atlantic's usually pretty good. So I'm actually going to flip this based off of how good a month Rick Scott had. If the election were held today, it seems like Rick Scott would actually flip this seat somehow. Just based off of the polling that I'm reading. Now, Indiana. Someone mentioned this in the stream yesterday, why I had it is going for Joe Donnelly. And after looking at the primary results, Joe Donnelly, I'm going to go ahead and just add about 100,000 for having no challenger to his seat. Even that doesn't match up to, even that doesn't change the fact that the Republicans had much larger turnout than the Democrats did. And Mike Braun is the nominee, and the only poll we have shows, and that was done in mid-May, shows Mike Braun ahead by 1% with 7 undecided. Look at hypothetical poll, and generic Republican is ahead, but, and versus the others, yeah. But Mike Braun won the primary, and it looks like he's in command. I'm actually willing to flip this one to the GOP just based off polling and primary turnout. But I want more polls before I, make that more competitive. Now, Maine, normally with a fairly popular incumbent senator, who is an independent and has said that he is willing to work with both sides on issues that he agrees with and he thinks are good for the state of Maine. Normally, I would rate this as safe, but there's a problem. Angus King tends to lean a bit more Democrat. He's been caucusing with the Democrats, so he kind of eats up that side of the aisle in terms of who his base is. So he normally appeals to the Democrats. However, there's a Democrat running, and the primary has happened. Yeah, Ringelstein might throw this race to the Republican. I'm not willing to call this safe independent. These are old ratings. And the Republican is Eric Brackley. And I don't have any polling with Brackley. We don't have any polling, but I am willing to call this one a true toss-up, or maybe even leans Republican, just because there's a Democrat in the race that is going to cause possible vote splitting for the Angus King supporters. And if the Republicans can realize that and just turn out their voters and say, don't vote for Angus King to keep it out of the hands of a Democrat, let the Democrats squabble over whether it's Angus King or theirs, they have a serious shot at taking this seat. For now, I'm just going to lean it towards Angus King. I think I had it as safe Angus King before. I don't know why I had it as leans, but I'm only leaning it towards Angus King. And even then, I am hesitant about that and think it could very easily go Republican. Watch Maine, because that could change a lot of things. Okay, so Josh Hawley versus Claire McCaskill in the state of Missouri. Narrow this one down. This is a Democrat internal poll. Narrow this one a bit because this is a Austin Petersen internal poll, but it's probably a little more accurate because it's rating Josh Hawley, not Austin Petersen. But that was mid-May. The only June poll we had is a Democrat internal poll. Then we have another Democrat internal poll, so narrow that one a little bit to get a more accurate picture. Emerson College, a non-internal poll, indicates a dead tie race with 11% undecided. Yeah, that makes sense. Democrat internal poll, narrow it down. Republican internal poll, narrow it down, actually flip it in this case. Narrow this one, and in this case flip it. Democrat internal poll. Non-Democrat internal poll, basically a tie. Basically a tie. This one is the only poll that shows a significant Republican lead that isn't an internal poll, and I think this one needs to be narrowed down, and it's old. Democrat poll, narrow it, in this case flip it. Republican one, narrow it, narrow it, narrow it. Essentially, there's a lot of internal polls being tossed around in this race, so the best we can do is declare it a tie and say, okay, we don't know what's going on, but I'm leaning it towards Claire McCaskill because Josh Hawley might have some baggage from the whole governor's mansion corruption stuff. Montana, based off of primary turnout, the Republicans have the enthusiasm here, though Jon Tester was not challenged in the primary, so you think you should maybe make up a little bit of a difference from that. But Montana doesn't have that many voters. And of course, we don't have any polls. I'm actually willing to put this as downgrade it from leans Democrat to true toss-up, but I always err on the side of the incumbent, so I'm still having Jon Tester winning it, though I consider it a true toss-up. Okay, so let's go to Nevada. Both primaries were contested by a ton, and a total of 142,000 Republican voters and 143,000 Democrat voters. Essentially, this is a dead even race, and keep this poll narrow, and that was a while ago, so it's actually old. This one shows, I would say, mostly accurate, maybe a little wider. This one shows very narrow Heller lead. And both of these need to be narrowed. This one specifically because it's an internal poll, but this one, I wouldn't even bother looking at this one because this is a 2017 poll, but it showed dead equal, essentially. So, yeah. I'm rating this one still as true toss-up, except unlike most situations, actually no, I have been rating this as leans Democrat, and I'm going to keep leaning this Democrat, at least until I get more information, and we have some newer polls. Okay, so, North Dakota, currently had it as leans Republican. Not a lot of people up here, and Heidi Heitkamp was uncontested, but they allowed write-ins, but whatever. Not a lot of Democrat turnout. I'd add in some votes, but I'm not sure it'd be enough to counter the Republican enthusiasm, especially with Kevin Cramer being as popular as it seems he is. That said, this shows it dead equal. This was an old poll, though. Same with this one, even though it's a Republican internal poll. I really just don't have any new information. The primary kind of indicates it should be Kevin Cramer. It should be at least a true toss and maybe leans Republican, but I'm not sure I have enough to truly say that. Anyway, moving to the next state, we have the state of Ohio, where I said that even though Sherrod Brown was unchallenged, I'm not sure there's 160,000 votes total for him to make up in the state. Looking at new polls, Quinnipiac, Suffolk, and even this Republican internal poll show Sherrod Brown in the lead by varying amounts. So I'm willing to say this is confidently leans Republican, not Republican, leans to Sherrod Brown. And there's a good chance that with a little more information, I might upgrade that to likely. What state is this? Tennessee. Yeah, so this needs to be narrowed a little bit. This is a Democrat internal poll. So this one shows a very narrow Bredesen lead, and that makes sense. You might want to increase the margin there. Mason-Dixon. Okay. It's about right where the average shows it should be. This is a Bredesen internal poll, so I'd narrow that one. Middle Tennessee, I'm going to throw this one out just because there's too many undecideds to use reliably. Narrow this one because internal poll. Narrow this one because internal poll. Internal poll, so actually widen that gap. Said the primary hasn't happened yet. We'll get a better picture with the primary, because primary turnout can help determine things, but I am downgrading this to leans Republican. And the only reason I'm doing that is because it is a Republican state, very heavily so, even if Bredesen has a polling lead. We have to remember it is a Republican state. And now to West Virginia, where I'm actually almost tempted to turn this from likely to safe Democrat, because Joe Manchin is kind of kicking Patrick Morrisey handedly. However, I'm not going to do that just because Joe Manchin's popularity has been tanking in the last few months. It really just depends on a lot of things that I don't think I have enough information to make that call. So as it stands, the Republicans actually changed 2 seats to the Republicans based off of polling and primary information. Though Florida, I'm not sure if that's just statistical noise that's putting Rick Scott ahead, but he is ahead. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you guys next time. Take it easy. And say anything you want in the comments as long as you're somewhat respectful. Bye.